All right, let's go ahead and do this. Hello and welcome, everyone, to the podcast Called to Serve. I really appreciate you joining me. I hope you'll try to be a part of this by calling in 762-2506-308 or Michael at calledtoserve.us. Please feel free to text, call, leave a voicemail, leave a email. Any way you can, join me in the discussion. I want to hear what you have to say. I'm going to go ahead and leave those ways to contact me in the description of the podcast, just in case, and I'll probably mention it again once or twice. I'm getting ready to talk about something that is quite a bit less popular than a lot of the things that I've talked about before. It seems that the more political we get, the less popular things are. On one hand, I understand it because the politicization, excuse me for that, of things is just naturally makes it more uncomfortable to talk about. But we should start talking about the things that are uncomfortable, especially if you are conservative, especially if you are someone who believes that this country is really taking a turn for the worse right now in the last several years and can foresee a continuation of that turn. If you're concerned about that, then we need to start talking about it. We need to get it out there. We need to talk to one another about it. We need to talk to our friends and our families, our neighbors about this. But anyway, one of the things that we need to talk about that's a very serious subject is voter fraud. Now, of course, the media has done a great job of trying to stifle us from speaking about this. And the way they try to do this is to try to basically, for lack of a better way of putting it, they're trying to insult anybody who will even bring up the possibility of meaningful voter fraud. And what I mean by that is voter fraud that is actually causing a difference in elections. And the very first thing they try to do is throw out Donald Trump. Okay, everybody saying things like, such and such percentage of Republicans believe in the false narrative that Donald Trump is trying to put out there, that the elections were rigged and that he really won the election in 2020 and things like that. It's they think they're clever in throwing out little things like that, talking about basically they throw out a false premise to begin with, that basically trying to make it sound as if it's a foregone conclusion that anybody who brings up fraud is bringing up something that is just totally untrue. And that in and of itself is not true. It is okay. And in fact, it's very important to talk about this. And I'm going to tell you a few reasons why. First off, anybody who cares about the integrity of our elections and the integrity of anybody who cares that we have confidence in those that we vote and put in office, that it was done legitimately and that it was done without enough voter fraud to cause a difference. Anybody who cares about that integrity and confidence in our system should want to talk about voter fraud. We should want to talk about keeping it from happening. So that should be a red flag to anybody who tries to start talking about it if you're just shut down from the very beginning. Or if you're called names, if you're called a conspiracy theorist, if you're called a crazy Trump voter, whatever it may be, don't allow that to stop you from talking about it, because anybody who gives even the slightest care about the integrity and the confidence in our system should be talking about this. Look, there's some things wrong with, even if you believe that there was not enough voter fraud to turn the election the way it was, and I'm talking about back in 2020, you should still have concerns about things that did happen that are not even disputed. There were polling locations that were shut down that are normally open to the public and should be open to the public. And I can see not necessarily having the entire public just crowding in so much that they cause a problem to where the votes cannot be counted efficiently, but at least allowing in enough people from all sides to be able to just watch and monitor the election. And there were these voting locations that were shut down like this were in locations that were in swing states, and not only that, but swing counties and even swing districts. So why did this happen? Well, no one knows because it won't be investigated. They've, instead of saying, put yourself in their shoes. If I was the one who was trying to defend and say, no, nothing illegitimate happened, nothing illegal happened, then I would welcome an investigation to be able to clear it and to be able to put a stop to all conjecture, to all of the false accusations. But yet there has not been a single investigation legitimately held, except for people that just say, yes, it was done the right way, and they call that an investigation. But there's not been an open investigation showing data and showing, even trying to explain any of the open irregularities which have happened. We have seen examples of lies that tried to cover up other lies as to why certain places closed down and kicked people out, so that they retreat to a room that is out of view of the public, out of the view of any cameras. And again, we're just supposed to believe that, okay, we'll trust them to do the counts legitimately and not commit voter fraud. Again, if you're saying, well, they did it fine, there was nothing found, then they should still open it up. That way they can put an end to the conjecture. Why not? If you have nothing to hide, then why fight against an investigation which is open itself to the public? That's first off. That even if you are a Democrat voter, even if you are a leftist, if you are a progressive, whatever, yeah, you go ahead and put whatever label you want on yourself. If you're not conservative, if you did not vote Republican, if you are voted for anybody other than Donald Trump, so on and so forth, even if you disagree that there was any sort of widespread fraud in the polls in 2020, why would you not at least just say, okay, let's do the investigation. I'll show you. That's what I would, if I was in your place, I would say, let's do it. Bring it on. That way I can show you just how legitimate it was. But no one is saying that. The same goes for the rules that were put in place in 2020 and were all quote unquote due to COVID, which I could spend a very long time just ranting and raving on that alone. I'm so sick of COVID being an excuse for so many of the negative things, very, very destructive and negative things that have happened in this country in the last 4 or 5 years. I was sick of it then. I was sick of the term bell curve. Everybody threw that around like it made them sound like they're some sort of a scientist who was to be listened to. And as it turns out, we see that we did nothing but destroy our economy. We saved no lives. In fact, there's research that is showing that we could have even made it just slightly worse because we bottlenecked instead of making everybody, allowing everybody to go on about their business, but being careful about how they did that. No, we shut down everything, and the only things that were open, we bottlenecked every single person, sick or not sick, into these very few places that we allowed to stay open. And everybody going into Costco or your local grocery store and forcing them in all into that one area. There's research that's showing that made it worse. And for sure, it didn't help. And that's aside from many other facts that I'm not going to get into right now because this isn't a COVID discussion. But the point that I'm trying to bring up is that we made so many terrible decisions during COVID in the name of trying to flatten out the bell curve. And some of them we have undone, some of them we can never undo. And some of them we are still leaving today, even though they should be undone. And one of those is voting by mail. And I'm not just talking about the way it used to be done. Whenever I was in the Marine Corps, you had to send in a request and you'd say, I'm not at my home I can't go to the polls. I'm stationed in another state, in another country. Please send me and me alone a ballot that I could fill out and mail in. And then they would do it. And you had to send proof that it was you. Today, they are sending out ballots. Again, they did this in the name of COVID, but now the emergency part of the pandemic, epidemic, whatever you want to call it, is over, and they're still doing it. So that just disproves that they were doing it because of COVID to begin with, because they're still doing it. And COVID, again, the emergency aspect of it is over. It's done. I'm not saying we need to shut down completely the mail-in ballots, but they should be back to restricted to only those who have a legitimate excuse, and it should only be those who are requested. Did you know? I wonder how many of you know that they are sending ballots to everybody. And now, whenever I say they, it's only in certain states, but they are sending to everybody. And these are states that still have not cleaned and purged their voter registration rolls of dead people, of foreigners who are not citizens, never were citizens, and people who have never even existed in some cases. Their names on a piece of paper, but otherwise do not exist. And that, by the way, is not just some sort of conspiracy theory. There are states that have cleaned their voter registration rolls, like Texas. And what they have found is there were literally thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of voters who were at one time alive and may have voted, but were dead, long since dead, years ago dead, or they were never voters. They were either people who were here illegally or legally, but were on voter registration rolls illegally because they were not citizens, or there were people who didn't exist. They have found all of these. Whenever in Texas, whenever they cleared out the voter rolls, they found all of these and in huge numbers. There's also reports of people who would receive mail-in ballots in states that just mail them to everybody. They receive their mail-in ballots of people who either no longer live at their address or never lived at their address, and for some reason they have gotten them. And what they can do is turn around, mail it in, and send it in, because these places are not requiring ID. A signature is what they're requiring. And do you really think that they are comparing that closely, the signatures, the way they're supposed to? I'm going to go ahead and say I don't have faith that they are. Two, I don't have faith that anybody could, even if they wanted to. That's not the same as checking someone's ID at the ballots. And the way you can keep voting by mail going for the legitimate ones who truly do need it because they're serving elsewhere is by restricting sending out voting ballots. Don't send it to everybody. You send it literally to only those who send in proof that they are away and they are legally registered to vote to begin with. Why would anybody want to just mail them out to everyone? Then that means you have so many hundreds of thousands of ballots that are just out there waiting for people to take and fill out illegally, fraudulently, and then turn them in, send them back in. It's making it very easy to, whether you believe it's happening or not, it is that easy if you wanted to. So why not, if you believe in integrity of elections, if you believe in having confidence in our system, you would at least want them to not send every single voter a card when many of them don't get to where they're supposed to anyway. And even if they do, it still leaves so much open to fraud. There's a good analogy out there that's going around, and it's one that I use a lot because it makes a good point, is would you, if you were trying to give money to, let's say you have a mom that lives an hour, 2, 3 hours away in another city. You live in San Antonio, your mother lives in Houston, and she needs $2,000, and you have that money to give her. Are you going to mail cash to her? No. There is nobody who would say that they would put cash in a envelope and send it to her. nobody with any sort of smarts, because that can just be fooled with. It can be taken, it can be open. Well, guess what? The